everyone is aware of Dante's Divine Comedy and the impact it had on the medieval and modern Christian world. But perhaps what a lot of people don't know is that preceding Dante about 200 years was a blind genius Arab poet called Abul A'laa Ma'ari, who imagined a journey through heaven and hell filled with discussions with prophets, angels and poets, creating a masterpiece of an Arabic book which had quite an impact in the medieval Islamic world as well. But unlike Dante, his aim was not to defend faith, but question it. This is Risalat Al Ghufran, or known in English as the Epistles of Forgiveness, written nearly 1,000 years ago by the blind poet Abul A'laa Ma'ari, who was a deeply skeptical and also a philosophical poet and thinker. The protagonist of our story is actually a real person, Ibn Qari, who was a sheikh who accused Abul A'laa Ma'ari of heresy. What Ma'ari does is he replies to him in form of a letter, which actually is this whole book. So the book is a letter. And then he makes Ibn Qari the protagonist of this story, who then journeys through heaven and hell, through the afterlife, chronicling his whole way. Some people consider the book satire, some people consider it spiritual fiction, but no doubt it is one of the most fascinating and interesting and also mysterious books of Arabic literature. In this video we'll go through who Al-Ma'ari was, what was the sort of world he lived in, why this matters, and what we can learn from the book today.
था 5वीं सदी हिजरी के शुरू में अबुल अला जो इतना नाबीना था और इतना बड़ा अदीब और फलसफी था वो कि लोगों का ये कहना है कि अरबी ज़ुबान अगर किसी आदमी के पेट में पूरे तौर पर समाई है तो वो 2 आदमी थे, एक अबुल अला मारी और इसी ज़माने में अंदलुस में था एक इब्न सीना मुर्सी।
Abul A'laa Ahmad ibn Abdullah Al-Ma'ari, as his full name goes, was born in Ma'arat al-Nu'man, small town in Syria, in the year 973 CE, which dates to 362 after Hijrah of Prophet ﷺ in the Islamic calendar. He lost his eyesight in the age of 4 due to smallpox, despite which still he managed to gain quite an interest in poetry, literature and philosophy. His family was well educated and he was taught Arabic grammar and Arabic poetry from a very young age. As a young man, he traveled to intellectual cities of Aleppo, Antioch and Baghdad. It was in Baghdad where he gained fame for his mastery in poems and deep knowledge of Arabic literature, but eventually he returned to his hometown and lived a life of self-imposed isolation. Ma'ari chose a very ascetic lifestyle in that he used to avoid meat, animal products, and was an advocate of social ethics in his time. He also wasn't very fond of luxury. He was critical of unnecessarily harming animals, and mostly his philosophy was based on reason, skepticism and ethics. He criticized religious leaders, tradition and social hypocrisy. Because of this, he was often misunderstood. Many saw Al-Ma'ari as a heretic, but others admired his courage and honesty. He was a rejecter of the blind imitation of past scholars called taqleed, and encouraged people to think for themselves. Despite living in isolation, his fame grew. Scholars and poets would write to him or come visit him to learn from the scholar. He died in 1057 at the age of 84. His funeral reportedly drew thousands of people, showing how respected he had become. Ma'ari left behind some very important works. Some of them include Saqat Az-Zand, which is his collection of short poetry. Another is Luzum Ma La Yalzam, a large complex collection of philosophical poetry. And then obviously one of his most famous books is Risalat Al Ghufran, an imaginative prose work which is also the subject of this video. Ma'ari's legacy is complex. He was a man of deep morals and sharp intellect who didn't shy away from the difficult questions of life. Today he is seen as one of the most original voices in Arabic literature, as a poet, philosopher who lived quite ahead of his time. So the Risalat Al Ghufran was written in 11th century, which was a time of intense religious, philosophical and literary activity in the Islamic world. The Islamic Empire was divided into dynasties with many sects disagreeing with each other at the time, with many famous people alive: the Sunnis, the Shias, the Mu'tazilites, the Asharis. All these scholars debated questions about reason, faith, eschatology, heaven, hell, and the nature of God. This was also the age of the adab tradition, a mix of literature, ethics, poetry, and witty conversations. Rasail, or letters, were the popular literary form, and writers used them to debate ideas, mock others, and respond to criticism. Ma'ari was sort of living in an Islamic golden age, and Ma'ari's Risalat Al Ghufran was written as a real reply to a letter sent to him by a man named Ibn Qari, who accused Ma'ari of heresy and immorality. Instead of giving a serious defense and a reply, Ma'ari replied with biting irony. He imagined that Ibn Qari had died and entered the afterlife. What followed was a satirical tour of heaven and hell, full of strange meetings with ancient poets, theologians, and sinners. Through this journey, Ma'ari sought to expose the hypocrisy of religious scholars, questioning literal understandings of paradise and punishment, and all the while defending the very values of reason and piety. Ma'ari uses classical Arabic but fills it with satire, humor, and philosophical depth. He plays with the Quranic language to challenge rigid interpretations. Ma'ari uses classical Arabic, but he fills it with satire, humor, and philosophical depth. He also draws heavily from the Quran and Hadith references to challenge rigid interpretations. This makes the Risala both beautiful as well as gives it a lot of its depth. It is admired by many and certainly revered in the scholarly circles. Scholars today see the Risala as one of the earliest examples of fictional journey to the afterlife, possibly influencing some of the later works like Dante did with his Divine Comedy. But even without that connection, Risalat Al Ghufran stands out as a powerful piece of Arabic literature that not only reflects its time but also questions it. It fits into the literary world of adab, yet also breaking the rules of that world. So Risalat Al Ghufran is written in the form of a long, imaginative letter. It's a reply to a real person, Ibn Qari, who accused Abul A'laa Ma'ari of heresy and immorality. Instead of arguing back in a normal way, Ma'ari answers with a clever satire. He imagines that Ibn Qari has died and he has been forgiven by God and is allowed to enter paradise. We'll look at some of the contents of the book now. So the book is divided into three main parts. The first part is the framing letter, written in formal prose. Ma'ari replies directly to Ibn Qari's letter, responding to his criticism in a very controlled, indirect way, and actually making prayer for him. This section sets the tone for the rest of the book. Polite on the surface, but mocking in subtle ways. It uses classical Arabic and rhymed prose called saja, the form of poetry amongst Arabs in which they espoused metaphysical truths and spoke of wisdom. The second portion is the afterlife journey, which is the main part. This constitutes the heart of the work. Ibn Qari then finds himself in paradise. He's surprised to be forgiven despite all the sins he has committed secretly. He begins to explore heaven. There he meets famous pre-Islamic and early Islamic poets like Imr al-Qais, Tarafa, Al-Asha, Mahmoud ibn Qais, Adi bin Zuhair ibn Abi Salma, Labid and Hassan ibn Sabit. These poets welcome him and recite to him their verses. But many of them seem unsure as to why they're in paradise. Especially some of them lived sinfully, died Christian or lived in pagan times. So what Ibn Qari does is ask all of these people what caused their pardons, usually ending up being some of their wise couplets. This part mixes poetry, Quranic references and witty, sly conversation. It questions religious certainty that how can these men be in heaven when tradition or the earthly scholars say that these people were doomed. The story then goes on with Ibn Qari speaking of his own forgiveness for all the sins that he had committed. He then goes on to converse with the guardian angels of paradise, Rizwan and Zufar in the Islamic tradition, to whom he goes on to recite poetry in every meter and in every rhyme in order to impress them, but that comes to no avail. This experience of his he describes in the book as if I was speaking to a mute and solid rock in the end, or trying to get a wild ibex to descend rather than ascend. So that's a funny thing from the book. Then comes Ibn Qari's meetings with Ali ibn Abi Talib, the revered Islamic figure, followed by him meeting the Prophet ﷺ's daughter Fatima. He speaks of the Prophet's shafa, the intercession, as many Muslims believe that Prophet will intercede on behalf of people. So a conversation takes place in that context as well. There is also the crossing of As-Sirat. This is followed by a very beautiful commentary on the beauty of paradise with specific verses on animals of paradise and the vine of paradise and then the hoods of heaven, Hurul Ain. Ibn Qari goes through all the stages of paradise, and there is mention therein of jinns of paradise too, who have their own abode in a certain section of heaven. Later Ibn Qari is shown the torments of hell as well, where he meets Shaitan, Satan, the devil, and then other figures from history, especially those who twisted religions and espoused false ideas. He finds many poets there as well, and he asks them their reason of why they ended up in hell. His journey of hell includes figures like Tarafa, Ash-Shanfara, Tarat Ash-Sharwa, Alqama, and other notable names. He then returns back from heaven, having a meeting with Adam alayhi salam, as well as the snakes of paradise as well, whose story is told to Ibn Qari. Then he returns to his hoods in heaven, the ones that were allotted to him, and the book ends with righteous poets describing to him in verse the joys of paradise. This is as far as the literary contents of the book go, which is followed by a final prose-formed return to reality. At the end, the tone shifts again and the heavenly journey ends. The original note then continues. Al-Ma'ari then speaks of his real message at the end of the book, namely that salvation and heaven is not to be earned from outer appearances, but rather from inner wisdom, humility, knowledge, and freedom from hypocrisy. The Risala consistently switches tones. It moves between high classical Arabic and playful storytelling, as well as makes use of rhymed prose called saja. It also involves a lot of poetry, irony, wit, sharp humor, and also a lot of references to Quranic ayahs as well as hadith. The overall effect is both funny as well as serious. A sharp philosophical critique written in a dreamlike tale. It is one of the earliest Arabic fictional journeys into the afterlife. It defends poets and thinkers who were attacked for not fitting religious molds. It uses parody as well. It uses parody of sacred language to question sacred assumptions, and it turns a private insult into a literary masterpiece.
जबरे तकलीद है इंसान की मौत और ज़हन की रूह की ईमान की मौत और ज़ौक़ की शौक़ की अरमान की मौत और मौत को अज़ीज़ कर दिया है।
So, at the heart of Risalat Al Ghufran lies a bold interrogation into truth, salvation, and the ideas of hypocrisy. Through an imagined journey into the afterlife, Ma'ari gently peels back the layers of religious certainty, exposing how people all the time confuse outer piety with inner virtue. The character of Ibn Qari, who represents the self-righteous scholar here, finds himself in paradise with flawed intentions as well as concealed sins. This irony sets the tone for the entire work, that all that appears to be righteous may be hollow, and all that is condemned sometimes may hold quite a bit of wisdom. One of the major themes running throughout the work is the fragility of human judgment, how we humans are so fragile in our saying who gets to be saved and who is the damned. Who gets to decide it exactly? Religious scholars? Do poets get to decide it? Or does this judgment is reserved for God alone? Well, Ma'ari, in context of these questions, does not offer easy answers at all. Instead, he questions the entire system by populating paradise with figures long thought in tradition to be infidels or sinners. The presence of these people in their respective places comes as a shock to Ibn Qari, from whom he in the book learns a lot of wisdom. This also suggests that divine mercy just may not follow human logic. Another deep theme in the book is rethought versus blind imitation. Al-Ma'ari was known for criticizing the idea of taqleed, which is copying others without thinking. In the Risala, he purports Ibn Qari as someone who just memorizes knowledge, who knows the poetry but lacks individual insight and real understanding. Poets then express these creative powers of theirs in front of Ibn Qari, and through this contrast, Ma'ari sort of argues in the book that independent and individual thought with sincerity matter quite a lot more than strict obedience to rules. The idea of divine forgiveness, the very title of the work, is handled with deliberate ambiguity. Ibn Qari is forgiven, but he is not praised either. His salvation feels accidental, almost comical. Meanwhile, those thought to be damned are revealed to be calm, wise and poetic people. The question lingering throughout the book is whether God's mercy is greater than human judgment, or if human concepts of heaven and hell are meaningful at all. Ethics also play a strong theme and a role in the book. Al-Ma'ari himself was known to be quite the moral philosopher. He was also, interestingly, a strict vegetarian. He believed in avoiding unnecessary harm to animals. In the Risala, there are hints and echoes of this. Humility is seen to be rewarded. Cruelty to animals in the dialogues is punished. And some of the most celebrated figures are those who lived with awareness and not with ignorance. Language itself sort of presents itself as a theme in the book. Ma'ari plays with Quranic phrases, turning them into parodies, not mocking the Quran at all, but rather mocking the way people misuse sacred language for power. The reader is constantly forced to re-examine familiar expressions, and questions come forward. Can beauty and truth exist outside religious authorities? And also, whether could poetry, like revelation be considered to be a source of light. In the end, Risalat Al Ghufran does not offer certainty. It raises questions with wit, depth, and irony. It asks its readers not to follow, but to think. Written in a time of rigid theological debates happening everywhere, this book and this letter offered actually a voice that is philosophical, skeptical, and unafraid to laugh in the face of dogma. It is this bold spirit that makes the work not only a product of its time, but also something that can very meaningfully speak to people of today.
ये मदरसे दानिश कदे इल्मो हुनर के मैकदे इनमें कहाँ से आ गए ये करगसों के घोंसले।
वाह।
ये जेहल की परछाइयाँ लेती हुई अंगड़ाइयाँ दानिशवराने बेयकीन गैरों के दफ्तर के अमी अल्फाज के ख्वाजा सरा। इनके तसर्रुफ में नहीं खूने बहारे ज़िंदगी, इनके तसर्रुफ में नहीं खूने हयाते जाविदां, बरहम है इनसे रंगे गुल आज दुर्गा है बादे सबा, ऐ करबला ऐ करबला।
वाह। Risalat Al Ghufran is not only quite the powerful philosophical work, it is also quite the literary experiment. Its author, Al Ma'ari, makes use of classical Arabic with extraordinary precision, pushing it sometimes to its limit, all the whilst he remains rooted in tradition. The result is a text that dazzles with its style just as it challenges the reader with its questions. The most noticeable feature of the writing is its use of saja, or rhymed prose. This was common in Arabic traditional and official writings. He imitates the rhymes and tones of religious texts and draws the reader into a sort of a familiar world, only to subvert it then with satire and unexpected meanings. This imitation of sacred form gives his critique more force. It does not attack religion directly, but reveals sometimes how hollow and performative religious language can become when put in the wrong hands. Ma'ari also fills the Risala with allusions and references to pre-Islamic poetry, because Ibn Qadim meets a lot of pre-Islamic figures. Quran, Hadith, stories of well-known poets are found across the text. These references are never shallow either. Sometimes they serve as parody, sometimes they're used to elevate the scene. The text consistently switches tones. In one moment, the narrator is serious and eloquent using classical forms, and in the next he's playful, absurd, or ironic. This unpredictability mirrors the message of the work itself, that nothing is fixed and everything should be questioned. Within the book, Al-Ma'ari inserts short poems, full verses, qasaids, and sometimes even little fragments or small couplets within the narrative. The text then becomes a sort of a hybrid of genres, a letter, a dream, satire, theological debate, poetic anthology. It's just a blend of all these things. Another stylistic device Ma'ari uses is the contrast. He contrasts opposites, namely the sacred and the secular, the believer and the doubter, the scholar and the poet, paradise and hell. But these opposites are not clearly divided. The ones who are supposed to be saved often look foolish or petty, and the ones who are condemned speak wisely and often with calm. Through contrast, he breaks down the moral certainty that many of his readers at that time, perhaps even today, would have taken for granted. The voice of the narrator is also a subtle tool. The book never tells the reader what to believe. Instead, Ma'ari creates a distance between himself and the action, letting the absurdity of events speak for themselves. This allows the satire within to work more powerfully because it leaves the room for interpretation. The work can be read as humor, it can be read as critique, it can be read as fiction or even philosophy. Finally, the language itself used is sharp, elegant, and extremely well crafted. Ma'ari was a master of the Arabic language. Finally, the language used is sharp, elegant and extremely well crafted. Ma'ari was a master of Arabic grammar, vocabulary, and rhetoric. He uses rare words, complex sentence structures, and layered meanings that would have impressed even the most educated readers of his time. But he never shows off or does this with exuberance. In all of this, book's author proves himself not just to be a thinker, but more of an artist. Risalat Al Ghufran is a work that takes the tools of classical Arabic literature and reuses them to challenge the very foundations of religious and literary authority. It's a book that knows its traditions very deeply and dares to twist it into something new. So one of the most debated questions about Risalat Al Ghufran is whether this book had an influence in any shape or form on what was to come 200 years later, namely Dante's Divine Comedy. Both works share a strikingly similar structure. They have strikingly similar themes, deal with the same undertones, questions, but answer very different set of questions. Meetings with famous historical and literary figures is rampant across both of them. There is deep reflection on salvation, sin, and the ideas of divine justice. These parallels have led many to ask that whether Risalat Al Ghufran and Al Ma'ari perhaps had an influence on Dante's work. Well, the idea was first proposed by the Spanish Arabist Miguel Asin Palacios in his 1919 called La Escatología Musulmana en la Divina Comedia, Islamic Eschatology in the Divine Comedy. He argued that not only Dante but Christian Europe more broadly had access to Islamic theological and philosophical ideas, especially through Andalus and the Lucia and the Latin translations of Arabic texts in places like Toledo and Sicily. In particular, Miguel noted the striking resemblance between Ibn Qari's tour of paradise, heaven and hell, and Dante's structured journey guided by Virgil and Beatrice. Both works involve meetings with souls who discuss their lives on earth, and both challenge simplistic views of divine reward and punishment. Dante places pagan poets like Homer, Horace, and Virgil in a special part of hell called Limbo. He also meets Saladin in Limbo, honoring them despite their lack of Christian belief. Similarly, Al Ma'ari places pre-Islamic poets in paradise, raising questions of who truly deserves divine grace. In both these cases, poetry becomes a sort of salvation, a path through the afterlife when religion alone seems insufficient. There are also major differences. Ma'ari's tone is ironic and skeptical, whereas Dante's tone is more serious and more theological. Risalat Al Ghufran is a satire of religious hypocrisy and rigid thinking, whereas Divine Comedy is a Christian epic grounded in the Catholic doctrine. Ma'ari laughs at the human attempt to define heaven and hell, whereas Dante builds a vast structure of moral logic to explain it to the people of his time. Evidence. As far as the evidence goes, there is no direct evidence that Dante read or knew of Risalat Al Ghufran. There's no mentioning of it ever by Dante. But the intellectual atmosphere of Europe, medieval Europe, was deeply shaped by Arabic thought, and this is scholarly consensus. Latin translations of Arabic philosophers and their works, including those of Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, were read in Europe by Dante's time. Stories of Prophet Muhammad's night journey, Isra wal Mi'raj, were translated into Latin as Liber Scala Macometi and other books, read widely. Some scholars even argue that Dante's vision of ascending levels of paradise may have been inspired directly by Islamic models. Not this book, but others. Still, we should be careful not to overstate the case, despite the similarity that is to be found. The similarity between the two works may reflect the shared human concern rather than direct borrowing. Many cultures have imagined afterlife journeys, but what makes Ma'ari and Dante special is how they use the form and language to reflect on meaning of life, what is knowledge and what is justice. One uses irony, whereas the other uses faith. In the end, Risalat Al Ghufran and the Divine Comedy stand as two masterpieces of world literature, each shaped by its time, its beliefs, and its language. Whether or not they are directly linked, they both show how the journey of afterlife can be a mirror for the soul, a stage for human flaws, and a path to deeper understanding of ourselves.
बार कैफी अबुल अला मार्री के ऊपर जो जिसके अजीब व गरीब फ़लसफ़े की वजह से जर्मन, फ्रेंच, अंग्रेज़, अमेरिका के इन सब आदमियों ने किताबें इंग्लिश में और फ्रेंच में और जर्मन में लिखी हैं और अरबी में भी बहुत सी किताबें लिखी हुई हैं, मगर मेरी किताब जब और इससे मुझसे पहले चंद साल पहले ताहा हुसैन ने एक किताब लिखी है ज़िक्र अबुल अला।
Risalat Al Ghufran may have begun just as a private reply to a critic, Ibn Qari, but it has lived on as one of the most important and daring works of Arabic literature. Today, it stands as a testament of power, of language, of symbol, and literary courage. In his own time, Al-Ma'ari was both respected and controversial. Many scholars admired his command of Arabic and his poetic genius, but some of his ideas, fairly speaking, made others uneasy. He was accused of heresy more than once, and his skepticism about religion, especially organized clergy, did not fit neatly into the religious norms of his time. Still, his fame spread, and even those who disagreed with him could not deny his brilliance. That's amongst the reasons why one of his busts was in Syria, and it remained there for about 1,000 years, despite the disagreements that the orthodoxy had with the poet. During later centuries, especially in the more conservative religious authorities, Ma'ari's works were often marginalized. Risalat Al Ghufran was rarely taught or studied in religious institutions. Manuscripts survived, but the work remained in the background of Arabic literary tradition. It was recognized, but it wasn't something that was widely read. In the modern era, especially from the 19th century onward, with Orientalism coming across, Al-Ma'ari and his fame began to grow. As Arab writers and thinkers grappled with modernity, colonialism, and reform, many looked back at the Ma'ari as a symbol of free thought and ethical reasoning. Figures like Taha Hussein praised him for his independence of mind. His work began to be reprinted, studied in universities, and translated into European languages. In Western scholarship, Risalat Al Ghufran drew attention, especially after its comparison with Dante's Divine Comedy emerged. Although direct influence is debated, comparison itself helped introduce Ma'ari to a global literary audience. Today, scholars place him alongside other figures like Voltaire, Lucretius, and Omar Khayyam, thinkers who combined literary skill with philosophical skepticism. In more recent years, Ma'ari's work has seen a revival. New Arabic editions and commentaries have been made to the text, and they have been made more accessible. English and French translations have also been done of his works, and which has also brought the poet broader audience. In Syria, Ma'ari became a cultural symbol, though at times controversial for sure. His statue, remaining for 1,000 years, was damaged by the local Al-Qaeda chapter, but still his legacy continues to be claimed by both secularists and critics of religious extremism. Online, Risalat Al Ghufran is now being discovered by young readers, students, and scholars. It's being included in university curricula on Arabic literature, world literature, and comparative philosophy. In literature festivals and academic conferences, Ma'ari's name is mentioned with increasing respect. as a poet who dared to think differently, and as a writer who proved that even in the strictest of times, imagination could be a form of resistance. Risalat Al Ghufran is not just a historical text, it speaks to today's world about the dangers of hypocrisy, about the value of questioning, and about the power of mercy over judgment. Its voice, written nearly 1,000 years ago, now still has quite a lot of truths that people need to hear in these times. Even in modern South Asian thought, Al-Ma'ari's legacy has rekindled. Allama Muhammad Iqbal, in his poem Abul A'laa from Bale Jibril, Iqbal saw in Ma'ari the tragedy of a great mind isolated from spiritual hope, offering a poetical reminder of the limits of skepticism. I'll end the video with recitation of Zia Muhyiddin of Allama's Bale Jibril's poem on Al-Ma'ari.
कहते हैं कभी गोश्त न खाता था मुअर्री, फल फूल पे करता था हमेशा गुज़र औक़ात। एक दोस्त ने भुना हुआ तीतर उसे भेजा, शायद कि वो शातिर इसी तरकीब से हो मात। ये खाने तरो ताज़ा मुअर्री ने जो देखा, कहने लगा वो साहिब गुफरान लुज़ूमात, ए मुर्ग़ के बेचारा ज़रा ये तो बता तू, तेरा वो गुनाह क्या था ये है जिसकी मुकाफ़ात। अफसोस सद अफसोस के शाही न बना तू, देखे न तेरी आँख ने फितरत के इशारात। तकदीर के काजी का ये फतवा है अज़ल से, है जुर्म ज़ईफ़ी की सज़ा मर्ग मुफाजात।
I would also like to add that I personally have started a Substack called Depth Beyond Belief .substack.com. I'll link it in the description as well. And in it, what I do is I explore the Risalat Al Ghufran words by words in my spare time. If it's something that interests you, I would love for you to join in, check in, and continue to read the publication.